Holy City Center Radio is episode 125, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023. Hope you all had a great weekend, and Monday was not too terrible for you. Sorry for the delayed episode, but we are here, still going to have 3 episodes this week. We got this one coming out today, Tuesday. We'll also have our normal one on Wednesday, and then, of course, Friday as well. Real quick before we get into the latest news, quick update. As I mentioned, I had some weekend plans I was excited about as I recorded Friday's episode. I record the day before typically. I was letting you all know that I was heading out to the Windjammer to see the incredible Grace Potter, and I was able to do that. Despite the weather being kind of iffy and me thinking that it was going to be inside, they kept the show outside on the beach stage, which is awesome. I really love seeing shows there. It's just cool being right on the beach like that, seeing the ocean behind the stage, especially if you are, up in the balcony of the Windjammer looking down. You can really see the ocean back there, and shows tend to start before the sun goes down, so it's really cool. It's a really great experience. I've gone to 2 shows this summer already there, and I really liked being able to be outside to enjoy it. So great show. Unfortunately, there was some questions of what the weather may end up doing, so it was kind of an abbreviated set, which Grace Potter mentioned when she came out, saying, hey, we really don't know what the weather's going to do, so we're just going to go through these songs. We're going to play nothing but the hits, kind of a joke. But, really, that's what she did. She played most of her most famous songs. I think she threw in 2, maybe just 1 song on her upcoming album that'll be released shortly. But in any event, really good show. Crowd was good. Despite the, abbreviated set, I think everybody still had a really good time. I was happy that they still got to see the show and they weren't packed inside the Windjammer, where I would imagine it would have been a pretty uncomfortable, judging by the amount of people that were outside for the show and those just kind of hanging out inside, because there was the bar's always open, even if you're not going to go outside to watch the show. And then, of course, they usually have like a band playing late night inside, so it would have been pretty packed. So happy it stayed outside, had a really good time. And then on Saturday night, I went to the North Charleston Performing Arts Center to see Nate Bargatze, an incredible comedian. If y'all haven't seen his specials yet, be sure to check him out. I think he's got a few different ones on different platforms, but I believe the most recent ones are on Netflix, so I would start there. Just a really good stand-up. He's really exploded over the last 5 or 6 years or so. I think the first time I saw him was at the Music Hall, and by the next year, he was playing multiple nights at the Performing Arts Center. He played 3 total shows there this year, so certainly a comedian that is doing well and quite popular. He had 3 openers, which is abnormal. They all had pretty quick sets. The first 2 were good. I hadn't heard of them before, but I enjoyed what they did. And then the third one was a surprise to me, but it was a comedian by the name of Nick Thune, who I was actually familiar with and a fan of. I don't think he has too many specials out there. But the one I do remember seeing was really funny. I've heard him on podcasts. I've seen other clips of him. He's just a really funny comedian, kind of a mix of like a Dimitri Martin and, Mitch Hedberg to an extent, kind of those like quick, silly one-liners that you don't see coming. So kind of a blend of those two. And it was really good. It was a nice surprise when he was announced as the third and final opener. I was really excited about that. Made the show just that much better, although even if the openers were bad, you're there for the headliner anyway. But they were all very good. And, of course, Nate killed it as always. So it was great. Very happy with both shows I got to see last week. It'll be a little bit quieter this week, but that's okay. I've got lots of work to do anyway. I can't go to multiple shows a week, every week. Although I would love to if I could. But that's a wrap up here from Holy City Centerland. Let's get into the news. Senator Tim Scott made it official on Friday, actually, that he is running for president of the United States. One of the worst kept secrets. We've known that he was probably going to be doing this for months and months and months, but you never know. And he did make it official on Friday when he filed paperwork with the Federal Election Commission declaring his intention to seek his party's nomination in the 2024 election. Although we learned about it on Friday that it was official, he did his official campaign kickoff event on Monday of this week. Scott, who is the Senate's only black Republican, had this event at the Charleston Southern University. And, after running through, I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched a little bit of it, read some articles after to see his quotes, and it's what you expect in these kickoff events. After running through some typical conservative talking points and nothing too shocking there. He also spent some time attacking Democrats. No surprise there. He also mentioned that he thinks he is the far left's biggest nightmare, and they're so worried about him because he challenges what they believe. It didn't make any sense to me. I stopped listening after I'm the far left's worst nightmare because I don't think he is anyone's worst nightmare. I don't think Republicans who support Trump or DeSantis or even Nikki Haley think he's a nightmare or a worry. I don't think anybody's worried. Come on, Senator. You're not going to be president. We all know that. No one's afraid of you. That's a ridiculous comment. But in addition to all that nonsense, after he goes on this, all his talking points, and Democrats and Joe Biden are trying to ruin this with the country and they're terrible for all these reasons, he ends the speech by saying, but we have to have compassion for people who don't agree with us. I mean, I just love it. You spend a big chunk of your nomination talking about how terrible the other side is, how they're ruining the country, how this, that, and the other. But we have to have compassion for people we don't agree with. Good start. Well, this was probably the best day of the Scott campaign. It's all downhill from here because, as I said, he doesn't have a snowflake's chance in hell of being the president. All right, back here to downtown Charleston. A story we've talked about before. I think some people had forgotten that this was in the works. It's been delayed a few times, but otherwise it was new news to people, and it's a story that bums me out, and I'll get into it a little bit more. But a 8-story hotel that's expected to replace the Alley single-story industrial building in downtown Charleston was approved last week for changes that will allow it to expand its food and beverage offerings. The Columbus Street property changed hands last year, and the new owner is looking to make changes by using the space on the top floor for a bar, terrace, and restaurant. So, for those who are unaware, the Alley is a downtown bar, restaurant, kind of entertainment center. It's been operating on this Columbus Street address since about 2012. It was an old like distribution center that they converted to this really cool facility. Again, has a bar, seating for for families and things who want to enjoy the food on the menu. They have, I think it's 4 lanes, maybe a few more that I'm forgetting. Maybe they're up to 6, I forget, but they have bowling lanes inside as well, arcade games, all sorts of fun stuff, and, they hold many events every year. Some are just fun events because there's a sporting event that is on, or they'll do charitable, gatherings, and, I mean, just really been involved in the community since they've opened, and a lot of people are familiar with the venue, even if they don't frequent it often. They've probably been there and enjoyed their time there. So, yes, there is a hotel that has been in the works for this property. It was the original owners, or the last owners, I should say. They had submitted plans for a hotel, but then they ended up selling the property to this new group. Unfortunately, this new group is continuing those plans to open a hotel on the property. There is a lot of steps that go into this. So even though it's been approved, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen, but it is obviously going in that direction. They already submitted some plans, and that's what this updated story is about, where they have changed some things to meet the city's requirements for them. So they had this 175 room project, and it was under review by the city to allow for some zoning exceptions to include like a valet served underground parking system. Originally, they had plans to say they wanted their parking system, whatever it was to be, a garage or lot or what have you, was going to be above ground. This request was approved by the city's zoning board back on May 16th. And unfortunately, no one spoke in opposition to the project. A Chicago based real estate partnership between North Park Ventures and MCZ Development paid $10 million for the property, which, if you're unfamiliar, is between King and Meeting Streets. The site was approved in 2021 for a 175 room hotel under its previous owner, as I mentioned. So these new owners are continuing down that path, same number of rooms, same general idea. But that is where it's at right now. Now, as I said, there's many steps. You never know what could happen. It could fall apart. But you would imagine, unless the city just shuts down, you know, a very significant idea or part of the plan that these owners have, this is going to open at some point. And that means they're going to destroy the building in some capacity, if it's not raise it completely, factoring it into the hotel. I don't see how they could otherwise. They're going to have to knock it down. Um, but we're a ways away from that. We don't know how long that's going to be, and the alley is going to continue to operate and have their business run as normal, as this whole approval process goes through. So, like I said, few more steps. You never know, but in all likelihood, the alley has is definitely at the end of its term here in Charleston, at least in its current capacity. Not that the owner, or not the owners of the alley, not the building, not that they have said anything about their future plans outside of they're going to remain in business during this approval process. So I'm not alluding to anything there. But certainly a bummer for me. As I said, it's always a bummer when a fun venue like that closes, even if you don't frequent it, especially when it's closing because the people who own the building just decide, meh, we'd rather build a hotel. I mean, it's just the most Charleston thing to happen, and it's such a bummer. And it's an even bigger bummer for me because it's a place I love. I constantly recommend it to people who are looking for something new to do in town if they've never been there before. They're looking for an event, or excuse me, an event space, especially if they're looking to, get people together for a charitable cause. Allie was always great about working with groups and families. And when I lived downtown several years ago, that was my spot. That was my hometown bar. Now, a lot has changed since those days. I no longer live downtown. I no longer have a uh, neighborhood bar, as it were, as the drinking days have ceased to exist. But I still periodically get out to the alley. My family, when they were visiting, one of their last visits, we went there, with the kids, my brother's kids, that is, in my folks, and we they took good care of us. We sat out basically outside in that area they have covered, ordered food, got to play some video games, and yeah, it's still fun. You don't have to go there for the bar aspect. There's just a lot going on there, and so as I said, although my lifestyle has changed, and I'm not there like I used to be, it's still a place I like to go to, and I finally remember it, and the people who work there always treated me so well, and yeah, very sad to see it go. I know there's always that outside chance. I'm holding on hope that something's going to change, but unfortunately, like I said, it looks like we're on the back end of the Alley's tenure here in Charleston. It will certainly be missed, but I'll keep you posted as things move forward with the hotel project. Got another update for you. The Supreme Court last week said that it'll hear oral arguments in a South Carolina redistricting case where the NAACP is challenging the state's Republican plan as racially motivated. You probably remember this story. The South Carolina Supreme Court ruled that District 1 here in Charleston was racially gerrymandered. The Republicans are claiming that's not true, and so they were appealing that decision. It's going to the all the way up to the Supreme Court, and so they're going to be hearing that challenge. Now, something that kind of threw a wrench in the plans is, or what people thought this where this process was going to go, was a realization a couple weeks ago by ProPublica that Democratic Representative James Clyburn here in South Carolina may have played an important part in the discussions when they were looking into redistricting the state. And now legal experts think this could play an important role in this upcoming Supreme Court case because the fact that Representative Clyburn not only is a Democrat, but is also black. There is some thoughts there that the Republicans who are appealing that original decision will try to use that to their advantage. Like, well, hey, a Democrat gave us his insight He's also, a black Democrat on top of that. So how can you say we racially gerrymandered when he signed off on it? Putting aside the fact that there's holes in that argument anyway, and believe me, I get that. But that's the thought process, is that somehow, because of these realizations, they may try to use that to their advantage. And honestly, who could blame them? So, just as a quick reminder, in 2021, South Carolina Republicans reshaped the voting map here in the state. They took a district that had been in the hands of a Democrat as recently as 2018. That's District 1, which Joe Cunningham won, and made it a much safer seat for the incumbent Republican, which was Nancy Mace. The NAACP brought a suit against the effort, and in January, 3 Democratic appointed judges ruled in the group's favor. Another reason why it's being challenged. The Supreme Court could decide to restore the map that Republicans drew or order that the legislature create a new map. The case comes after a series of rulings from the High Court that have made partisan gerrymandering easier, although the court has still deemed redistricting predominantly based on race to be illegal. Yes, you heard that right. It has become easier to gerrymander districts in this country over time. Not all, why easier and not less easy, I don't know, but that's politics for you. But if there is a bright side, at least they do decide that if it's based on race, and that's a bridge too far. Although no gerrymandering should be done, but in any event, legal experts said this week that the South Carolina case will likely help define the limits of how much a legislature can consider race as it draws new maps. South Carolina Republicans have defended their efforts, saying they were not motivated to dilute black political power in the state. And their lawyers have argued that, during the trial, that they did not consider race in making that map. So they're arguing it wasn't even part of it to begin with. And now they're also contending that the map could not have targeted black voters because they worked with Clyburn, who is one of the most powerful black Democrats in the country, let alone the state. As I mentioned this month, ProPublica added new detail to this account, reporting that Clyburn had been more involved in the process than previously known. He recommended moving black and white voters in such a way that made his district politically safer for himself, but hurt black Democrats overall. His role could be an important underlying factor for the Supreme Court, as I mentioned, and it just turned this whole case from, there's no guarantee, but you see a lot of us here in the state who saw the district and have been hearing the story were like, yeah, it was clearly racially gerrymandered. Well, could this, like I said, throw a wrench in the plans? Would this change that? We'll see, I suppose. Going back to Clyburn's recommendations, he sought to move about 85,000 people in the majority black sixth district to make up for a population deficit. His map also moved some white Republican leading residents out of his district and into the first, as I mentioned. So, yeah, as I talked about in previous podcasts, I don't care who's behind it. Gerrymandering should not be allowed. It's sad that it's easier to do in this country now than it used to be. And it's frustrating when these sorts of things happen. It's even more frustrating when both parties essentially collude might be a strong word, but we'll see how this all plays out. But at least work together in some capacity to allow a gerrymander to occur. And if ProPublica's reporting is accurate, and I have no reason to doubt it, it's been an extremely disappointing development, and hopefully it won't have any bearing on the court's ruling. Just because two parties work together for one district to kind of help out Republicans and the other to keep it safe for a Democrat, that shouldn't change the fact that it was racially gerrymandered, and shouldn't allow it to be okay. But as we've seen with the Supreme Court, this current Supreme Court, you just really never know where they're going to rule on these things. So we'll keep you posted. It should be an interesting ride, that's for sure. All right, and lastly, today, Mount Pleasant Mayor Will Haney says a fundraiser will be taking place on June 2nd to benefit the Cobb family, whose shrimp boat caught fire and sank during the Blessing of the Fleet ceremony back in April. They were actually had this scheduled for this month, but it was postponed due to weather. The new date is June 2nd. The fundraiser will take place at Muddy's Dockside Bar on Shem Creek, beginning at 2 p.m., and will feature a silent auction, raffles, and drink specials. Haney said last week that Captain Larry Cobb is continuing to recover in the hospital after he was badly burned in the fire. For more details on that, just hit the link in my show notes. And if you'd like to get out there and help out the family, June 2nd will be the day for that. So that'll do it for the Tuesday edition of Holy City Center Radio. I'll be back with you tomorrow. We've got some updates and more news to go over. We'll be talking about Charleston County getting a new deal with a new medical provider. So we'll talk for their detention center. We'll talk about that. And there will also be some more stories, some of which may change, so I better not preview just in case. But be sure tomorrow to tune in, and you'll be able to hear the latest news here in the Charleston area. To make sure you don't miss any episodes, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, like it, review it, give it 5 stars if you so choose, because that'll help not only the podcast, but also will help make sure that you are seeing the podcast in your feed. I also would like to thank you all for listening and being patient with a day delay on this episode. I really appreciate it. If you want to help out in other ways, go to holycitycenter.com/shop or go to patreon.com/holycitycenter. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins and Cole Collins with LMC Sound System for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio, and to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every episode as well. I can't wait to talk to you all tomorrow. Until then, good night and good luck.